Thank you, Shane, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome back to another slice of the good, the bad, and the orange. Today, I am really thrilled to have a great friend of mine and a man with more knowledge than I could ever hope to have, Tim Scarpino. Tim is Skim. You're Skim. You're Skim. No
friends.
Yeah, really skinny dipping. No, I met Tim in a golfing networking group, and over the years we've enjoyed the symphony and cigars. And Tim is the founder of a company, STVsecurity.com, which deals with short-term rental security issues, which has become a big topic as more and more short-term rentals have come to the market and municipalities have started to crack down on them. And on my left and your right, or if it's in reverse, I'm not sure, is our own Chuck Sennett. And he's not in the Senate, but Chuck is probably another avid golfer, an exceptional real estate agent. He covers a lot of the East Valley, and he's joined us to be, I guess, a leveler head in the group, and we needed one today.
Hey now.
Yeah. So the topic we're going to cover today, for the most part, is I think one that we as agents get asked a lot about, and that's short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO. Not VRBO anymore, it's Verbo. And Tim has a pretty extensive background with short-term rentals and actually working on putting together a large, what would you call it, investment group to purchase short-term rentals. And so one of the questions we get is, I think everyone thinks that that's the easy money. Let's just start renting out houses short-term and make millions of dollars, and especially since the advent of COVID, where it skyrocketed as everyone decided to go back on vacation and didn't want to go to germ-infested hotels. They thought houses would be cleaner. There was a massive ramp-up in people buying houses for vacation rentals. But there's more to that story, isn't there?
More to the story, and more to it than just flipping the house up on Verbo and making your millions.
So when you as you have learned over the past few years, what are the basics of what makes a great vacation rental, and what are the what doesn't make a great vacation rental? For a while people are just, let's rent out our casita and make a lot of money, and let's rent our house that backs up to a major street and we'll be fine. And what as the market has changed, back to a more normal market, what do you think people should be looking for as they start to think about vacation rentals?
Yeah, so Jay, thanks for having me on your podcast today. It's always good when we get together here. But just kind of taking a step back and looking at vacation rentals from a top 30,000 foot view, and we'll start with kind of the basics of how vacation rentals are legal, right? And really it goes back to Senate Bill 1350 that was passed in 2016 by Arizona's Governor Doug Ducey. And essentially Senate Bill 1350 said that municipalities must treat long-term rentals the same way they treat short-term rentals. In other words, municipalities could not set these rules and barriers to a short-term rental unless they did that also for a long-term rental. So that's kind of what legalized vacation rentals back in 2016. So we fast forward, like you mentioned, the COVID, the advent of the new COVID traveler, in addition to people thinking that homes were more sanitary, Arizona remained open during COVID. And
True.
We got that new COVID traveler, right? The guest that would come from their Malibu beach house that said, hey, I'm not allowed to walk on the beach in front of my house in Malibu. I'm going to come rent your Paradise Valley house for $20,000 a month during the COVID time. So we had this whole new traveler that came during COVID. But like you said, it was also cheap money, and we also had an influx of new properties come into the market. There's about 13,000 homes in the valley right now. 13,000 homes that are operating as short-term rentals.
Well, it is interesting you talk about that COVID traveler. We saw that as well with buyers. Remember, there was this idea that no one's going to buy houses because they're not going to travel. And what they did was the opposite. They went to places they could travel and they could buy a house. And if they had been thinking about it in the future, they said where the future is now. And in some areas, we saw people saying, you know what, my money should be invested in real estate. And Arizona, because of its, I guess you could get there, for lack of a better term, we're gonna buy houses, and someday we'll use them. But that's what happens when we don't use Duracell. So I was at, so people came here and they said, I'm going to invest in real estate. So we saw the advent of, to my surprise in the beginning was $2 million Airbnb properties. People selling homes or buying properties at a huge number because the rate of return was astronomical, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And, I know when we were buying homes, we wouldn't look at anything unless it was 10% or 9% cap rate or higher.
And that's pretty hard to get in a regular rental situation. If you look at long-term rentals, getting a 10% cap rate is rare, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a licensed realtor, so I'll let you talk specifically about cap rates, but
disclaimer.
nor do I sell insurance or an attorney, and disclosure.
Wow, and a big asterisk. Well, and Chuck's had some experience with people looking. In fact, you were talking about a story where, I think everyone came and said, my budget is X, and I want to buy an Airbnb, and it might be, and I'm not making light of dollar amounts, but someone says $300,000, $400,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, it should make lots of money. What happens?
Well, yeah, I think especially my particular client who was looking in the area of Scottsdale for that price, you're just not going to get the type of home for that price that you're going to need to make that kind of income, because you're not going to stand out. And I think that's the key with short-term rentals. You're going to have to stand out. There's so many out there.
There's so many out there, and when we break down the numbers, we really look at 90% of all short-term rentals in the valley here are 4 bedrooms and fewer. So
wow.
So 90% is 4 bedrooms and fewer. Going to 5, you lose so much of the competition, and it even is highlighted the more bedrooms that get added, right? So the 6 bedrooms, there's fewer competition. 7, 8, 9, fewer and fewer competition. But so we know going back to what makes for profitable vacation rentals, right? And we know the old adage, it's about heads in beds, right? We've heard that, heads in beds. How many heads can we fit in beds? But there's a whole lot more to it than that.
That could be a cultural thing, though, couldn't it?
Well, two beds per head, or 2 heads per bed,
okay.
assuming
Right.
that it's a queen or bigger. And we get into bedroom configuration separately.
How many heads per bathroom you were talking about?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And we were talking about, so we know it's heads and beds, but really the ratio that we look for what's the most profitable is 3 guests per bathroom. 3 guests per bathroom. So we know that we can expand upon that. We can go 4 guests per bathroom. But what happens is, again, it goes back to heads and beds, and that's how much money we generate. But typically speaking, the more we deviate from that 3 or 4 guests per bathroom, the less profitable percentage-wise each additional head and bed becomes.
Diminishing returns. I learned that in economics.
It's absolutely the point of diminishing returns.
And Krispy Kreme.
And
Yes.
those are diminishing.
Yes.
So we look at heads and beds and bedrooms, and unfortunately, and I get this question from realtors a lot, is what can I type into the MLS to search, right? What can I put this search criteria under? And unfortunately, there's not a buy box per se as a traditional rental would be. And Jay, you made an interesting point at the intro. You said, I would not, or something along the lines of buying a house that's on a main road.
Right.
Right? And that is the absolute best purchase that one could make for a short-term vacation rental.
Really?
Because as we know, we talk about cap rate and how our cap rate, I'll let the realtors explain what is the math formula for how cap rate is calculated.
How much profit you're making versus the total investment.
That's right? How much do I make per year divided by what was my initial and what was the overall investment into it, right? That's the cap rate. So we know that the returns on a main street will be as good or better than the return of a home that's, say, 5 blocks in from Scottsdale Road.
Because you're paying far more for the house 5 blocks in, right?
Well, but we're going to generate the same revenue, right? So that variable remains the same, but the variable, Jay, like you're saying, the changes is I'm going to pay significantly more if I'm 5 blocks in as opposed to right on that main street.
Absolutely.
So-
A buyer who's looking to buy a home for themselves isn't
Right.
way
Well,
less likely to
we always said it was the time to sell anything in the past 2
Yeah.
years. So it didn't matter if you backed up to a power line or a road, you could sell it. But so let's talk about that though. So now I think we'll see more disparity in those prices, right? So during the last 2 years, there really wasn't as much disparity between a house that had an undesirable or less desirable trait. People just were buying it because there was no inventory. But as you look to the future and you're looking for someone that wants to buy, invest in Airbnbs, kind of what you're indicating is those are the properties they should be looking for.
Yeah, the traditional thinking of, hey, I'm going to get this house on a quiet little cul-de-sac street. Well, that's the worst place to buy a vacation rental, is on a quiet little street. You want the noise. You want the ambient noise because your home will be loud. They will be hanging out in the backyard. They will be smoking cigars and
Neighbors will be
chipping golf
complaining.
balls. And we know there's a strict noise ordinance, a 9 p.m. noise ordinance in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley. I don't know if you guys know this, but Paradise Valley's, do you know what their unruly gathering is? 5 or more people. 5 or more people
In your
is
home?
at the property.
Wow.
Is an unruly gathering by the letter of the law. By the letter of the law. And, we talk a little bit about the original Senate Bill 1350 and what legalized vacation rentals. We know now that in June, the Senate passed 1168, Senate Bill 1168, that was signed into law in June and took effect in September. And what this law said, 1168, is that cities have the right now to create and now revoke business licenses. So the city of Scottsdale or Paradise Valley, now where they previously did not, you could make them register, but there was no enforcement. Now one has to have a business license. The law says they cannot charge more than $200 for the license, right? But they have to apply for the license. And if that property receives 3 violations, public nuisance violations, or I think the proper term is public safety, right? So underage drinking, unruly gathering, allowed party noise ordinance violations, parking, right? These are all cited. If your property gets 3 of these within a rolling 12 months, that city can revoke your business license. And here's what's crazy, Jay. Let's say I have at my property, I get my 3rd strike in September of 2022. My business license is revoked. I sell my house to you. And Jay, you said, hey, you know what? It's October. I have this new house. I want to apply for my business license. Well, that license is revoked for 12 months. Regardless of ownership, it stays with the
Attached
property.
to the property, that's what I was going to ask.
It's kind of like a house being labeled with meth. It stays forever. But no,
At least the smell.
Yeah, well, so that is interesting, and I know that is exactly what led to you forming your new company, was that idea of managing tenants. I mean, in a way, not from a head count, but noise and anything that would create a violation of the ordinances for owners, right?
Yeah, so that's where STVR, short-term vacation rental security, STVR security was born. The fact that there is very limited opportunities for these vacation rentals companies and management companies to actually have someone respond to the guests at 2 a.m, to show up whenever they're being unruly. And now they have a vested interest in stopping the problem before it happens. We know that part of this recent budget that the city of Scottsdale passed, they created, I want to say it was, I forget, 6, 8 new police force, task force, 2 short-term vacation rentals. Right? We know that. We know that the city of Scottsdale will be enforcing as much as they possibly can to stop these party houses from happening. And I'll tell you, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
Jay,
go ahead.
but coming from the industry, I think every responsible management company and owner wants to get the problem houses out of the industry.
Well, I would agree. It's I have mixed feelings on this because I'm a firm believer in, private property and property rights, and your right to use your property any way you wish within reason.
That's right.
But on the other hand, if you've ever been somewhere where there's been one of those houses, and it seems stereotypically it'll be the same house over and over again, meaning they seem to allow anything because no one enforces it, so they don't care.
Well, speaking from personal experience, I know that one of the reasons why my wife and I never wanted to buy a short-term rental was because all the people that have short-term rentals, the one thing they complain about is guests. It's so hard to vet your guests properly and to know who's going to be staying there, and they don't care that, like, if you tell them, oh, this home is only for 6 people, they'll bring over 12, then they don't even let you know. And so that's usually the complaint that you get from those owners, is that how do we manage these people when they don't follow our rules and they don't care, and then they worry about whether or not they can give a bad rating to them because they're going to retaliate.
Well, it's simple.
So it sounds to me like your company is going to help owners with that.
Yeah, but also, listen, very rarely will you ever hear me compliment the state of California. But one law I think they did well was they said that if one wants to operate a vacation rental, they need to run it through a professional management company. And the problems that you're stating over there are very common, but in my opinion, this is what happens when individuals who don't understand everything that goes with managing a company. How do we check guests in? How do we set those proper expectations? How do I set my pricing to not let these guests in? When do I raise prices? When do I lower prices? How do I maintain the property? I'm in that house a lot of times 3 times a week, right, as a management. So again, I don't think it's good to compliment California's laws often, but I do appreciate the fact that if one wants to operate a vacation rental, they need to use a management company. And Jay, you mentioned earlier about the private property rights, and that's always been our argument. Is it's our 4th Amendment private property rights. If we're not doing anything illegal, then why shouldn't we be able to operate our house as a short-term rental? That was the genesis behind the Senate Bill 1350. Whenever the Goldwater Institute got involved in that fight and getting it legalized, and that's been the argument, your private property rights.
Well, and I will tell you that when you look at ADRE, so the Arizona Department of Real Estate, one of their highest level of complaints is with property management companies and renters. So think of that, even with those that are regulated, that's the highest amount of complaints. So now you take people that are managing their own mini hotels, and many of them are not local, so they're from somewhere else. And again, not to throw everyone into the same basket, but that's what happens with unmanaged properties. Basically, I collected my rent, and whatever management program I've used, or scheduling, Airbnb or VRBO or any of those, says, yeah, they passed a background check, so that's good.
What's the saying, a penny wise and a pound foolish?
Yeah, exactly. And so it isn't just enough. And no different with businesses. Even though we have private property rights, to me, the values of neighborhoods are really tied to the perception, the lifestyle, the civility of a neighborhood. And so if you've got a house or 2 in there that are known as the animal houses, for those born in the 90s, you'll have to look that up. But anyhow, they hurt property values, and that isn't fair either. I mean, that's infringing your beliefs or your lack of beliefs or your neglect on somebody else's property.
Well, you've made excellent arguments for both pro and con. for vacation rentals.
I want to appeal to all.
And we've seen the signs, or maybe we haven't, but we've seen the signs around Scottsdale, the neighbors not hotels, or neighbors not nightmares, and homes not hotels. And I feel so, and I've met with that group, and you know, I want to be part of the solution, and I think most responsible vacation rental managers want to be part of that solution. But we met with them, and I empathize for the guy. The one guy, he retired. He has a beautiful house in Paradise Valley. The house to his left sleeps 28, and the house to his right sleeps 30. That sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And I also empathize with those that live in their you know, quiet little Kierland neighborhood just outside of the HOAs, and they have a house with 20 or a street with 20 houses on it, and 7 of them all on one corner of vacation rental. I empathize with that. I really do.
Well, and that's the problem also you see with the HOAs being so militant, is that where does that put people? It pushes the Airbnb investor into all the areas that don't have it. So it's not like the fringe communities around the HOA communities. And not that it's good or bad either way that HOAs crack down on that. But again, I think that's when you get some sort of ordinance that addresses that and enforcement, and the self-regulation. I guess when you talk about management companies and security, when you talk about the cost of management. So, you know, that's probably what everyone says. Well, I won't make my rate of return if I have to pay somebody. But what does that look like?
Most management companies that I know of are charging 30%.
Okay, and even with a 30% fee on to manage it, if you've got the right property, what's your rate of return going to be? What's your cap rate going to be?
Okay, sure. So let's start over at the top, right?
Yep.
So here's what we say. First off, every deal's not the same. Right.
Yes.
Those days of, hey, I got $1 million, let me buy a house and throw it on air, done, gone. Right? Those don't exist. So the realtor's job, right? That's why it's so great when they partner with you know, people like Jay over here, and that they really understand the market. That not every deal pencils out the same. But here's what we say: the acquisition price, right? How much do we buy that property for? That home should gross revenue 20% of the acquisition price. If I buy $1 million house, I should gross $200,000. If I buy a $2 million house, I should gross $200,000, right? So that's kind of how, or excuse me, if I buy a $2 million house, it should gross $400,000. That's roughly what the numbers say. Now, with the recent rise of home values, it's probably closer to 15 than 20%, but there's certainly still good deals out there. Now that gives us the gross top line number, right? That's how much gross revenue we're pulling in. The net number to the homeowner, net. Now this is before debt service, right? Before I have to pay my principal or interest. And the reason I say it is debt service and not your mortgage payment is because what I'm about to say includes your property tax and property insurance. Because a lot of these homes are held in cash.
Right.
And so they still have to pay that. So we're gonna gross 20% of the acquisition price. Our net will be about 50% of the gross. That's going to include your property tax, your insurance, your property management fee, your sheets and towels and linens and all your toiletries, your pool service, your landscaping, your pest control, everything, right? Net, 50% of the gross. Now, if one has a note, they're going to have to take out their principal and interest out of that 50%. So if we buy a $2 million house, we're going to gross $400,000. We're going to net $200,000. So that's roughly what the numbers pencil out as. And then again, not every deal pencils out the same. One of the sayings that I like to tell potential buyers are that higher the ceilings, the higher the revenue. That's
a great analogy. So you've got the house with 8-foot ceilings and 1960s built old Scottsdale house. You're probably going to generate less than you've got 14-foot ceilings because you've got all the luxury amenities. We were talking earlier about the best price range for Airbnb houses. Again, we were talking to Chuck about his client trying to find something between $800 and $1 million and not being able to find it. And one of the advents here was the I would call it the multi-million dollar Airbnb properties. And you had indicated that those are properties that are less likely to be impacted by economic changes or market changes.
Certainly, we know a couple things, right? First, we can look at some old case studies from the Great Recession. It's a hotels, the Ritz-Carlton, the high-end 5-star type hotels, and we know that they did well. Maybe not as good as always, but they did well during the last recession. And why is this? Because rich people make money in a down economy.
Yeah.
And rich people vacation in a down economy. And rich people stay in mansions, right?
Yep. The more flamboyant the finishes or the backyard's outdoor space, the more the higher the rate of return, and obviously the higher the occupancy rates. So Chuck, did your guy ever end up buying something?
No, he figured it was best to go ahead and take the tax hit than buy something that
Then
wasn't
1031
before,
it.
yeah.
Well, I think that probably sage advice is, as real estate experts, it isn't always our job to push people to buy something. It's to give them the information. And I know over the past few years, I've called Tim and said, okay, here's a property. What's it lacking, or what isn't it? And because we can't know everything, and there are elements right in a property that make it more advantageous for short-term rentals. So really important question. Favorite golf ball? I know what yours is.
Yeah.
And that is?
I'm still using Pro V1s mostly,
Yeah.
but there's a couple of golf balls out there that are cheaper.
They're
They can still
competing
work. Yeah, they still work.
Sure. I'm playing the Chrome Softs right now, the Callaway Chrome Softs.
That's one of them I've heard of. Yeah.
I play the ones that I find out in the desert. I really like the price point, and
Especially if they're orange.
well, and the orange ones, yes. Did you know that orange balls theoretically travel further?
I have heard that.
Yes.
There's truth in that.
Because orange is truth.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
The truth is, they are easier to find in the desert.
And that for me, that's really the underlying is, when they're out there, I have a chance of finding that ball. And when I go for that one orange ball, I find another few others because some people aren't going to go out and fight rattlesnakes and.
Well, God bless you for doing it.
Yeah, well, that's my job.
There's a way to prevent that,
Yeah, lessons.
Or just got to hit it in the short grass.
Or give up the game.
Never.
Never, that's right. Couple of quick notes on the market as we wrap up. We continue our, I would call it normalization, which for agents, and I would say the 30 and under, maybe 32 and under home buyers, not quite sure what that is. It's really, it has made, in a lot of ways, home purchasing and selling, I think, more pleasant. I know sellers love the idea of auction-type bids on their houses, and buyers had high levels of anxiety. But as our inventories have flattened, so we're not seeing the massive increases we were before. In fact, we're leveled off, and we're starting to see glimpses of increases in buyer activity. Up in North Scottsdale, of course, that is driven a lot by our seasonality, which didn't exist in the last 2-3 years. There was no seasonality. People just came in droves and bought first and asked questions later. Now we're seeing more seasonality, and ironically, Octobers historically are the best months for luxury listing inventory. So if you're in that market or thinking selling, October is that time. That's the stats, not me talking. And again, I think interest rates have been an impact on people, but the good lenders are finding, I'd call them workarounds or short-term alternatives. I don't know What have your clients, people out there, have you seen much impact on, what's your impact been on interest rates?
Well, buy downs are a big thing right now. If you're looking to buy a home, a lot of sellers are willing to do concessions for buy downs, which is a win-win for everybody, and that's what we like as realtors. We like win-wins.
Yeah, and the one expert, Fletcher Wilcox, who we love, said, he looked at it as sellers from the peak might have to give back 5 or 10% of their massive gains.
So they only make 90%.
Yeah, right. And but when you think about that, what a better place to do that in concessions. I mean, so we want homeowners, we want first-time homebuyers back in the marketplace. It's healthy. We've had all this investor purchase, which is really what skews the market. One of the things they've talked about is that even though our inventories have flattened and prices have stabilized, we have a couple of iBuyers who have massive inventories that they don't quite know what to do with, and they could have some downward pressure on pricing as they try to dump their inventory. And that's why, again, when you get homeownership at a higher level, especially first-time buyers, they tend to stay in their houses, build some equity, move up, and that's good for the overall market. Tim, any last words of wisdom? You want to give a Tim joke, a Timism?
Timism.
There are Timisms. I know there are.
Let's see. We got plenty of Timisms.
Give me your best one. First one comes to mind.
Do today what others don't, so you can do tomorrow what others can't.
Ooh, you went profound. I write that down for me so I can remember that. Chuck, any last words? Anything you're seeing out there that you think would be good to share?
It's almost golfing weather, but let's tee it up.
I like that. That's good.
I'm in.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Scarpino for joining us. He is, he's a fabulous resource. And again, his security company is
stvrsecurity.com.
And he has a plethora of knowledge in many things, but a lot of it indirectly real estate related. Chuck is always a great volunteer, stepped in, and
thanks for having me, Jay.
Very diligent agent. Chuck is a former professional poker player, and I've always liked that about him because I remember the first 2 weeks he was with us. He said very little, but I was watching him observe, and I went, dude, this guy he's like taking it all. He's summing up his assets, finding out who he's got to watch out for. And when he wore the dark glasses, I could still kind of see that he was, but anyhow, I like the way he looks at things. And, it's our backgrounds that really give us that, our current expertise. So with that said, if we appreciate you listening. You can find us on all of the finer podcast locations. And if you're on YouTube, we would appreciate if you would like and subscribe to our podcast. And with that said, thank you for joining us for the good, the bad, and the orange.